The whispers followed Ren Lawson everywhere in Haven Colony. 3 standard months on this frontier world, and all anyone talked about was the alien who lived at the edge of the settlement. 9 feet tall with skin like polished obsidian. Warriors from birth. They eat their enemies' hearts. Don't look her in the eyes or she'll mark you for death. Ren had heard enough. As the colony's environmental specialist, he needed access to the eastern ridge where unusual plant samples had been reported, directly through the territory everyone avoided. "You're insane," said Director Thomas when Ren announced his plans. "No one approaches the Vraxian. We have an understanding, we stay away, she stays away." "Has anyone actually tried talking to her?" Ren asked. Thomas's expression answered before his words. "Colony policy is non-engagement. That's final." Which is why Ren found himself hiking alone at dawn, equipment pack strapped to his back, deliberately violating colony policy. The ridge loomed ahead, morning light casting long shadows through the violet-leaved trees. He paused at a stream to refill his water container when a shadow fell over him, too large to be natural. He turned slowly. She stood 15 feet away, motionless as stone and nearly twice his height. The descriptions hadn't captured her properly. Yes, her skin was dark, but it held an iridescent quality that shifted with her breathing. Her face was angular with high cheekbones, her eyes large and entirely golden without visible pupils. A complex pattern of raised ridges adorned her forehead and continued down her neck, disappearing beneath a fitted garment of unknown material. Most striking was her stillness, a predator's patience that made his pulse quicken. Ren raised both hands slowly, palms forward. "Hello," he said. "My name is Ren." The alien's head tilted slightly, the first movement she'd made. A sound emerged from her throat, melodic but incomprehensible. "I don't understand," Ren said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I'm just passing through to collect plant samples." He pointed toward the ridge, then pantomimed examining plants. The alien watched, unmoving again. Ren took a careful step forward. Then another. The colony's warnings screamed in his mind, but something deeper told him to continue. 10 feet apart. 8. 5. At 3 feet, he stopped and looked up into her golden eyes. "Tazara," she said suddenly, one long-fingered hand touching her chest. "Tazara," Ren repeated, then touched his own chest. "Run." Her mouth curved slightly, a smile. She lowered herself to one knee, still towering over him, and extended her hand, palm up. After a moment's hesitation, Ren placed his hand in hers. Her skin was warm and surprisingly soft. "Why you come?" The words were thickly accented but recognizable. Surprise froze him. "You speak our language?" "Small words." "Listen long." Her fingers gently curled around his hand. "Humans fear. You not fear?" "I was curious," Ren admitted. "Everyone talks about you, but nobody knows you." Tazara released his hand and stood again, pointing toward a path Ren hadn't noticed. "Come." "Where?" "Home." She started walking, her stride covering twice the distance of his. After a moment's hesitation, Ren followed. Her dwelling was nestled against the ridge, partly cave, partly constructed from local stone and wood. Inside was unexpectedly warm and filled with objects he couldn't identify alongside practical tools and what appeared to be scientific equipment. "You live alone?" Ren asked as she ducked through the entrance. "Yes." "Long time." She gestured to a seat fashioned for someone her size. "Others of my kind, far. Colony ship damaged. I stay to study." "You're a scientist?" Ren couldn't hide his surprise. Tazara made a sound, laughter, he realized. "You think warrior only? Like humans say?" She touched the equipment. Study plants, animals, stars. Learn humans. Humans not learn me. Until now, Ren thought. He unshouldered his pack. I study plants too. That's why I came this way. Show, she said, settling across from him with interest in her golden eyes. As Ren spread out his collection tools and notes, explaining his work, Tazara listened intently. When their fingers brushed while examining a specimen, neither pulled away. And when Ren finally left hours later, the feared alien of Haven Colony walked beside him to the edge of her territory. Return? She asked simply. Ren smiled up at her. Yes. Tomorrow? Tazara nodded, the corners of her mouth lifting in that almost smile again. As Ren walked back to the colony, he realized the rumors had been right about one thing: he had indeed been marked. Not for death, but for something far more interesting. Ren couldn't focus on his work the next day. His mind kept drifting to Tazara, her unexpected intelligence, the careful way she handled his specimens, how her eyes seemed to shift colors in different light. Heard you went outside the perimeter yesterday, said Nadine, his lab partner. Tell me you didn't actually see the alien. Her name is Tazara, Ren replied, packing fresh collection vials. And yes, I met her. Nadine's eyes widened. And you're still alive? What was she like? Nothing like the rumors. She's a xenobiologist, studying this planet just like us. Nadine looked skeptical. Director Thomas is furious. Says you violated direct orders. Then I'd better not be late for my next violation, Ren said with a smile, slinging his pack over his shoulder. This time, Tazara was waiting at the stream. She wore different attire, a deep blue covering with intricate patterns that complemented the natural ridges on her skin. She raised a hand in greeting. You return, she said, satisfaction in her voice. I promised I would. Ren approached without hesitation today. I brought something. He pulled a small device from his pocket. It's a translation module. It might help us communicate better. Tazara examined it with delicate fingers. Human technology interesting. Have similar. Not calibrated for human speech patterns. She led him deeper into her territory, to a clearing where various plants grew in organized sections. My garden, she explained. Plants from many worlds. Ren marveled at species he'd never seen before. Why do you stay isolated? You could share this knowledge with the colony. Tazara's expression darkened. I tried. When first humans came, I approached with greeting. Weapons pointed at me. Fear in eyes. She touched her chest. Words learned not enough to explain. Easier to stay away. They misunderstood you, Ren said quietly. Size causes fear. Vraxian appearance, intimidating to humans. Her golden eyes studied him. You different. Why? Ren considered the question. I guess I wanted to see for myself instead of believing stories. They spent hours in her garden, Tazara explaining the properties of each plant while Ren recorded notes. The translation device gradually improved their communication, revealing her precise scientific mind and unexpected humor. As dusk approached, she prepared a meal from her garden harvest. Safe for human, she assured him when he hesitated. The food was delicious, rich with unfamiliar but pleasant flavors. They ate under twin moons, sharing stories of their worlds. Your people, Ren asked carefully, are they all scientists like you? Many paths for Vraxian. Warriors, yes, but also healers, builders, knowledge seekers. She leaned closer. Physical strength valued, but mind strength more. Her proximity made his pulse quicken. Even seated, she towered over him, yet there was a gentleness in how she moved around him, careful not to intimidate. Colony fears wasted, she said suddenly. Could help each other. Share knowledge. I could speak to Director Thomas again, Ren offered. Explain who you really are. Tazara's expression turned skeptical. Words not enough. Actions show truth. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and something shifted between them. Ren became acutely aware of the space between their hands on the ground, mere inches that somehow felt charged with possibility. I should return before they send a search party, he said reluctantly. Tazara nodded and rose to her full height. Return path dangerous in dark. Will guide. They walked side by side through the forest, her night vision guiding them safely. At the edge of colony territory, she stopped. Tomorrow? She asked, just as before. Yes, Ren answered without hesitation. As he turned to leave, her hand caught his, engulfing it completely. Run, she said, her voice softer than he'd heard before. Careful with others. Some humans see friendship with Vraxian as betrayal. I'm not afraid of what they think, he replied, squeezing her hand. She released him reluctantly. Should be. Fear sometimes protects. Ren watched her disappear into the darkness before heading back to the colony. At the main gate, Director Thomas himself waited with 2 security officers. Environmental Specialist Lawson, Thomas said coldly. We need to discuss your unauthorized interactions with the alien entity. Her name is Tazara, Ren replied, straightening his shoulders. And yes, we definitely need to talk. As they escorted him inside, Ren glanced back toward the forest where Tazara had vanished, knowing with absolute certainty that no colony rules would stop him from returning to her tomorrow. You're being reckless, Director Thomas said, pacing his office. That Vraxian is an unknown entity. Not to be trifled with. I've spent hours with her. She's a scientist, just like us, Ren argued. We could learn from each other. Thomas shook his head. Your access privileges are restricted to within colony boundaries until further notice. Despite the director's orders, Ren slipped out before dawn the next day. His heart pounded as he approached their meeting spot, wondering if Tazara would be waiting. She was. Humans tried to stop you, she stated, not a question. How did you know? Colony perimeter sensors increased. Guards doubled. Her golden eyes studied his face. Yet you came. I wanted to see you again. Something flickered across her expression, surprise, perhaps even pleasure. Come. Show you something important. She led him deeper into the forest than they'd ventured before, to a hidden clearing. At its center sat what appeared to be a damaged spacecraft, sleek, with organic curves unlike human vessels. Your ship? Ren asked. Small transport from main vessel. When damaged, others left to continue mission. She touched the hull. I stayed. Planet samples needed longer study. Inside, the ship was a marvel of technology. Ren gasped at holographic displays showing detailed planetary analyses, far more advanced than colony equipment. 5 cycles I study, she explained. Send data when signal aligns. 5 years alone, Ren murmured. No wonder you approached our colony. Vraxian social beings, despite appearance. Her voice carried unexpected emotion. Solitude, difficult. As she showed him her research, their hands brushed frequently. Each touch lingered longer than necessary. When she demonstrated a scanning device, she stood behind him, her arms encircling his body to guide his hands. Ren felt her warmth, breathed in her exotic scent, like cinnamon and something uniquely alien. Humans believe Vraxian violent, she said softly near his ear. Truth, we value connection above all. Ren turned in her arms, looking up at her. What kind of connection? Many kinds. Knowledge sharing. Community bonds. Her voice lowered. Intimate bonds. Ren's pulse quickened. Can Vraxians and humans form intimate bonds? Unknown. Never attempted. Her hand rose to touch his face with surprising tenderness. Wish to discover. Their first kiss was tentative, an exploration of differences. Her lips were warmer than human temperature, slightly firmer. Her hands cradled him with exquisite care, mindful of her strength. When they parted, Ren was breathless. Tazara's eyes had darkened to amber, the ridges along her skin faintly luminescent. Physiological response. Unexpected, she whispered. Pleasant. Very pleasant, Ren agreed, drawing her down for another kiss. Their exploration continued, each discovery more intoxicating than the last. Despite their physical differences, they found common ground in desire. Tazara's touch was both powerful and gentle, her body a landscape of fascinating differences that Ren mapped with wonder. When they finally came together fully, the connection transcended the physical, a bridge between worlds. Afterward, they lay together in the ship's sleeping chamber, her long form curved protectively around his. No Vraxian record of human-Vraxian pairing, she murmured, tracing patterns on his skin. We're making history, Ren said with a smile. Making more than history. Her expression grew serious. Making dangerous choice. Colony will not accept. They just need to understand you like I do. Tazara shook her head. Understanding requires openness. Fear closes minds. Then we'll have to open them. Ren sat up, suddenly inspired. Your research, it could help the colony. The Eastern Ridge soil samples showed toxicity in our last tests. If your technology could identify the source. Would demonstrate value, she finished, comprehension dawning. Practical assistance over abstract acceptance. Exactly. Let your actions speak. As they dressed and gathered her research materials, Tazara pulled Ren close once more. Whatever happens, this connection, she touched his chest, then hers, is truth between us. They emerged from the ship into chaos. Colony security forces surrounded the clearing, weapons raised. Step away from the alien, Lawson. Director Thomas's voice boomed through an amplifier. Tazara stiffened, her body instinctively shifting to protect Ren. No, Ren said firmly, stepping in front of her. Her name is Tazara, and she's not a threat. She's the best hope this colony has. As searchlights illuminated them, Ren stood tall beside his towering alien lover, refusing to let fear destroy what they had found together, a connection that could save them all. Lower your weapons, Ren demanded, standing firmly between Tazara and the security team. Director Thomas stepped forward. You violated direct orders, Lawson. Because those orders are wrong. Tazara has knowledge that could save this colony. Your judgment is compromised, Thomas replied, but Ren noticed his gaze shifting to the ship behind them. Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A violent aftershock knocked several security officers off balance. The quakes are getting worse, Thomas admitted. 3 colonists injured in the last one. Tazara spoke up. Quakes not natural. Caused by crystalline formations beneath Eastern Ridge. Your mining disrupts stability. And how would you know that? Thomas asked suspiciously. My research. She gestured to her ship. 5 years studying planets' geology. Have solution, if you allow. Another tremor, stronger than the last, decided for them. Thomas reluctantly ordered his team to stand down. Back at the colony, Tazara's presence caused immediate commotion. Children stared wide-eyed at her towering figure while adults whispered behind hands. She remained dignified despite their fear, focused on explaining her findings to the colony's scientific team. The crystal formations channeled thermal energy, she demonstrated on her advanced holographic display. Mining fractures the natural system. Creates pressure buildup. Nadine studied the projections with growing respect. Our equipment never detected this energy signature. Vraxian scanners more sensitive, Tazara explained. Can recalibrate colony equipment. Director Thomas remained skeptical until the largest quake yet struck during their meeting, cracking the operations center's walls. The emergency siren blared as reports flooded in of collapsed structures in the residential section. We need to stabilize the eastern ridge immediately, Wren insisted. Thomas finally relented. What do you need? The next 12 hours blurred into frantic activity. Tazara worked tirelessly alongside colony engineers, using her strength to move equipment that would have required machinery. Her knowledge guided them to precise locations where stabilizing compounds could be injected into the fault lines. As night fell, Wren found her working alone on a ridge overlook, making final adjustments to a monitoring device. You should rest, he said, touching her arm. Almost complete. Her focus remained on the delicate calibration. When she finished, she finally straightened to her full height, exhaustion evident in her posture. Wren led her to his quarters, the only private space available to them. Inside, she seemed too large for the human-sized room, yet somehow belonged there. Your people watch me differently now, she observed. You're saving their lives. Fear is giving way to gratitude. Tazara sat on his reinforced bed, pulling him gently into her lap. Today proves what's possible when species cooperate. Wren traced the luminescent ridges along her neck. It proves what we already knew. Their bodies came together with newfound familiarity, her extraordinary height and strength balanced by incredible gentleness. Wren marveled at how perfectly they fit despite their differences, how their anatomies found harmonious connection. Her skin glowed brighter with each passionate moment, illuminating the darkness as they moved as one. Afterward, wrapped in her protective embrace, Wren asked, will your people return for you? Eventually. When mission complete. She hesitated. Was prepared to leave when time came. Now. Her golden eyes met his. Now, decision more difficult. Stay, he whispered against her skin. The colony needs you. I need you. A tremor interrupted their moment, not from the planet, but from colony alarms. Emergency in Eastern Sector, came the announcement. All personnel report immediately. They dressed hurriedly and rushed to the crisis. A secondary fault line had ruptured, threatening the colony's water reclamation system. Without it, the settlement would become uninhabitable within days. Stabilizers not reaching deep enough, Tazara assessed quickly. Need direct application. The shaft is too narrow for equipment, the engineering chief said. Tazara looked at the narrow maintenance tunnel. Not too narrow for me. It's too dangerous, Wren protested. The tunnel could collapse. No choice. She cupped his face with her large hand. Trust my strength. As colonists gathered, Tazara descended into the unstable shaft with stabilizing compounds strapped to her back. 30 agonizing minutes passed before the ground settled and sensors showed decreasing pressure. When she emerged, covered in mineral dust but triumphant, the watching colonists broke into spontaneous applause. Thomas approached them, humbled. You've saved our colony. We owe you our gratitude and an apology. Gratitude accepted, Tazara replied. Apology unnecessary. Fear natural when facing unknown. That night, as the colony celebrated their salvation, Wren and Tazara stood at the edge of the gathering, her arm protectively around his shoulders. They see you now, Wren said quietly. The real you. Tazara gazed down at him, her eyes reflecting starlight. They see possibility. As you did from beginning. As they sealed this truth with a kiss, neither noticed how the colonists watched, not with fear, but with dawning acceptance of something extraordinary unfolding before them. 1 month after the crisis, Haven Colony had transformed. Tazara's dwelling had been connected to the colony perimeter, her research integrated with their own. Where fear once ruled, curiosity now flourished. Director Thomas called an assembly in the newly repaired community hall. "Today marks a new chapter for Haven," he announced. "Thanks to xenobiologist Tazara, we've established contact with the Vraxian Science Authority. Their delegation arrives next month to discuss formal exchange protocols." Applause filled the hall. Ren squeezed Tazara's hand as she stood beside him, no longer an outsider. "Additionally," Thomas continued, "we've approved the first cross-species habitation unit." He nodded toward Ren and Tazara. "Your new home will accommodate both human and Vraxian physiologies." Children who once hid from Tazara now followed her through the colony, fascinated by her knowledge of the planet. She taught them Vraxian words and showed them how to identify beneficial plants with patience that belied her warrior appearance. That evening, Ren and Tazara walked to the ridge overlooking both her old dwelling and the expanding colony. "Your people's delegation will expect you to return with them," Ren said, voicing the concern that had haunted him. Tazara gazed at the horizon. "Have submitted formal request to extend mission permanently." She turned to him. "As Colony Vraxian liaison." "They approved it?" "With condition." Her eyes held an intensity that made his heart race. "Must demonstrate successful integration possible." Ren understood her meaning. "Us." "Yes." She knelt before him, bringing their faces level. From a pouch at her waist, she withdrew a bracelet made from iridescent material that matched her skin. "Vraxian tradition. Bond promise. Are you proposing to me?" Ren asked, emotion tightening his throat. "Different paths, same journey." She offered the bracelet. "Choose together?" Ren extended his wrist without hesitation. "Yes." As she secured the bracelet, it adjusted perfectly to his size, faintly glowing where it touched his skin. Ren removed the chain from around his neck, where his grandmother's ring had hung since he'd left Earth. "Human tradition," he explained, offering it to her. The ring was too small for even her smallest finger, so she threaded it on a cord of her making and placed it around her neck. Their kiss sealed promises no formal document could capture, a bridge between worlds that began with one human's courage to approach what others feared. Later that night, in the privacy of their temporary quarters, their bodies joined in celebration of what they'd created. Physical differences that once seemed insurmountable now enhanced their connection, her strength and his agility, her warmth and his tenderness creating a harmony unique to them alone. "When delegation arrives," Tazara whispered against his hair, "some will question this bond." "Let them," Ren replied. "We've already answered the important questions." As dawn broke over the ridge, they stood together watching both moons fade from the sky. The colony stirred to life below them, no longer divided by an invisible boundary of fear. "First of many sunrises together," Tazara said, her arm protectively around his shoulders. What had begun with one human daring to walk toward the feared alien had transformed into something neither world could have imagined, not just tolerance or alliance, but love that transcended physical form. And as the first transport ships appeared on the horizon, bringing curious Vraxians and new human colonists alike, Ren and Tazara stepped forward together, ready to show both their peoples that understanding could always overcome fear, and differences could create strength when embraced with an open heart.